Every morning, Black Bear would greet him with a wave, but he soon realized it wasn't a friendly hello. Paul and his small family decided to make a change and move to a house nestled in the serene woods. Being an avid outdoorsman, Paul wished to instill a love for nature in his children, just as he cherished it himself. The new house offered a secluded atmosphere, with the closest neighbor a good 10-minute drive away. While Paul's wife, Sarah, initially had reservations about living so far from town, she eventually agreed to the idea. The first few days in their woodland abode were delightful, but soon, Paul noticed something unusual. Nature seemed to be encroaching upon them, and in particular, a black bear had become their unexpected visitor. For 2 consecutive mornings, Paul awoke to the sight of a magnificent black bear on their deck. Intriguingly, the bear seemed well acquainted with its surroundings, showing no interest in disturbing any outdoor furniture. Paul was the sole witness to these encounters, as he was an early riser. Debating whether or not to share this peculiar phenomenon with his family, Paul knew that revealing the bear's presence might give Sarah reason enough to return to town. However, his curiosity was piqued, especially because whenever their eyes met, the bear would lift its paw and wave in an oddly friendly gesture. Paul was aware that there were bears in this part of the woods. In fact, he was told that some of them do show up and walk up to the houses when they smell food, but Paul knew the architects of this house had put that into consideration. The glass doors leading to their deck were reinforced and strong. If the bear would want to come in, it'd have a hard time. All the windows and doors are made with security and animal attacks in mind. As long as everyone's indoors, the family should be safe. Paul was sure the bear did not come to their home looking for food. As a rule, they didn't cook anything that would emit a strong smell, so they won't attract wildlife. So he came to the conclusion that this bear must have a different motive. He decided that if the bear showed up a third time, he would observe it more closely. Paul noticed that the bear would be waving at him, and when he approaches the glass doors, the bear would jump off the deck and then look up at him from the ground. The next morning, Paul woke up extra early. He had a cup of coffee while he waited by the glass doors. He noticed the bushes rustling and the big black bear was climbing up their deck again. The bear saw Paul instantly and then waved. Paul waved back. The bear jumped off the deck again. When it reached the ground, it waved at Paul. It took a few steps towards the woods, stopped, and waved again. Paul realized that the bear had not been waving hello all this time. It was more of a follow me beckoning. Paul wasn't sure what to do. He knew Sarah would kill him if he went out and followed the bear into the woods. That is, if the bear didn't kill him first. It did sound like a stupid idea, but it was also the only way to get answers. Paul quickly scribbled a note saying he went out for a hike and would be back in the afternoon. He took a look out the deck and saw that the bear was still waiting. Paul quickly went out the back door and locked it behind him. Paul was a fan of wildlife, but he never was this close to wild creatures before. When the big black bear saw him approach, it headed towards the woods. It then looked back as if to check if Paul was following, then take a few more steps forward. The bear checking on Paul was something it would do from time to time. It was clear that the bear wanted Paul to follow all the way. Paul couldn't believe that he was doing something so reckless, but he was also curious about what the bear would want from him. Paul had never heard of black bears behaving this way. This one probably needed help, and if it lived in these parts of the woods, then it must have seen what a human can do. He's heard of animals asking humans for help, but these are usually gentler creatures. But then again, what did he know? There was also the possibility that the bear was just luring him deep into the woods, and when they reached a spot where he was far enough from getting any help, the bear would simply attack him and have him for breakfast. But the longer he followed the bear, the more confident he was that it meant him no harm. If the bear wanted to hurt him, it would have done it by now. There was no reason the bear would wait this long if he was just a meal. They had been walking for almost an hour when the bear finally came to a stop. Paul thinks his family back home was awake by now and had found that he was gone. But even then, they wouldn't be panicking since he left them a note that he went out. Paul stopped as the black bear made a halt and seemed to freeze in place. Then it looked at Paul, as if it was waiting for him to do something. Paul looked around him, trying to see what the bear needed him for, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. The bear was sniffing the ground frantically, as if it was looking for something. It was frustrated, as if it had lost something. This made Paul nervous. He was guessing that this was the place the bear wanted him to see. But whatever was there, it disappeared. As the black bear started sniffing around angrily, Paul wondered if this was a good time to carefully make an exit. He didn't want to be around an angry bear, but as he took a few steps back, the bear quickly turned to him and showed its teeth. Paul knew the bear didn't want him to leave. He definitely wouldn't dare to challenge it, so Paul stayed put. He was starting to regret this decision and knew he would never hear the end of it from Sarah if he makes it back home, and she knew the truth. Suddenly, the bear stood up, its eyes fixated on something in the distance. It looks like he finally found the scent. The bear quickly headed in that direction. Paul stood in place, not sure what to do. Should he follow the bear? On the other hand, this was also a good chance to escape and go home. The bear was clearly more focused on the scent and getting to whatever it was looking for. The bear didn't even look back to check if Paul was following. Even though Paul was scared, he had a feeling that he shouldn't leave the bear on its own. The bear turned back and looked at him and waved again. Paul knew it wanted him to follow. The bear only started walking again once it was sure Paul was following. This big black bear clearly wanted to have Paul around. Paul was now sure of his decision to follow. This time, the bear was moving faster than before, and Paul had to jog to keep up with it. It looks like the bear was in a hurry, which made Paul curious. To Paul's surprise, the bear led him to a trail. This was a part of the forest where a path had been cleared before. The bear led him to a part of the forest where there were more signs of human disturbance, like trash and cut trees. In the distance, Paul was able to see a wooden cabin appearing through the trees. He realized that this was the closest neighbor to his house. After talking to the man before moving, Paul arrived at the cabin to find it oddly empty, and his neighbor was missing. Surprisingly, a bear led him to the garage where it roared loudly, causing panic inside. Paul responded to his neighbor's screams, but silence followed. The bear became fixated on the garage door, showing aggression as a faint, non-human sound emerged from inside. With the noise, the bear grew more furious, bending the garage door under its paws. Finally, the neighbor opened the door and discreetly fled out the back. As the bear stormed into the garage, Paul saw a bear cub lying there, in distress and struggling to breathe. He realized the black bear was the cub's mother. Puzzled about how the cub ended up there, Paul noticed the neighbor opening a window to explain that he had found the cub while hiking in the woods an hour ago, assuming it had been abandoned and wanting to take it to a vet. The neighbor believed it was best to intervene as the cub seemed unlikely to survive in the wild. Perhaps the mother bear felt the same, seeking help from Paul's house repeatedly. However, professional assistance was crucial. Upon the neighbor's advice, Paul awaited the arrival of a vet, and they decided to tranquilize the mother bear. With the bear sleeping, the vet took both the mother and cub away for temporary care. Once the cub recovered, they planned to release both bears back into the wild. Over a week later, the vet invited Paul and the neighbor to witness the bear's release in the woods. A heartwarming reunion unfolded as the mother and cub joyfully played together after being apart during the cub's treatment. As the bears departed, Paul received a heartwarming farewell wave from the mother bear. Subsequently, Paul's family occasionally spotted the bears, observing their health and happiness and finding relief that the mother bear no longer frequented their deck.